Welcome, everyone.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone.
So while we're waiting for folks to join us, I just have a real quick question. What brought you here this afternoon or this evening? And is there anything specific that you would like to address or that you'd like to have answered? So if you have any questions that have come up or you'd like answers to, please feel free to respond in the chat. So folks are still joining. We're going to give them a couple minutes.
Andrea in the chat box, thank you for joining us, Andrea. She said she wants to hear similar experiences while dealing with the district. So we will definitely be discussing that this evening.
Yes, we're looking forward to some really good discussions. If you've ever been to a START project webinar or workshop before, our events are always very interactive. So we really look forward to good conversation and hoping that we like to hear from you as well as you hearing from us.
Absolutely. And Veronica said this is her second web meeting, so welcome. I see Carolina. Hi, Carolina. Hi.
We're gonna wait till about, we have a couple minutes. I'm gonna give
it maybe about a minute or two, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, so there's a globe at the bottom of your control panel. And even if you don't need interpretation, you need to choose a language, either English or Spanish. So if you don't need interpretation and you'll be listening to the presentation or the workshop, if you'll be interacting in English, choose English. If you'll be interacting in Spanish, choose Spanish. Great. Lisa says she's just here to learn more. Andrea, this is your first session. Welcome. At the end of the webinar, just so you know, we will be sharing a link to an evaluation, and it's always helpful for us for you to really fill out the evaluation and let us know what you thought and what things we might want to change, what things we did well. That feedback is always really helpful for us. So Carolina shared that she wanted to learn more how we can communicate with the schools, and that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, we'll be definitely sharing some tips and some resources in a follow-up email, but we will be, so don't worry about having to capture everything right away, because we'll be sharing everything in our follow-up. So Stephanie, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Okay. Sure, you bet.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Well, this is yours.
Yep, I am. So for those of you who aren't familiar with SPAN, and I know folks will be joining, and so for those of you who are not familiar with SPAN, if this is your first webinar, since 1987, families in New Jersey and beyond have made SPAN their first stop for support and resources. Today, SPAN's projects and programs for parents of children from birth to age 26 and for women of childbearing age have expanded from a kitchen table to over 20 national, regional, and local programs funded by government agencies, foundations, and fee-for-service contracts. These programs cover education, health, and mental health, human services, childcare, and child welfare. Our mission is to empower and support families and inform and involve professionals interested in the healthy development and education of children and youth. Our foremost commitment is always to children and families with the greatest need due to disability or special health, mental health needs, poverty, discrimination based on race, ethnicity, gender identity, language, immigrant or homeless status, involvement in the child welfare or juvenile justice systems, geographic location, or other special circumstances.
Thanks, Debbie.
Sure.
So Debbie, Tatiana, myself, and Cynthia, we're part of the START team, which is engaging parents of students with disabilities. We offer workshops such as this one, regional meetings, and parent leadership development activities that support the engagement of families in education to improve outcomes for students. We help with starting and strengthening special education parent advisory groups or parent support groups, providing families with information in order to increase the number of students benefiting from greater access to inclusive education, increasing the capacity of schools and parent leaders to engage families in promoting literacy achievement, sharing information useful for families and schools and district leaders to engage families in the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support Framework, which is our focus here this evening. Debbie?
Thank you. So I just wanted to, we just want to introduce ourselves. I'm Debbie Esposito. I co-direct the Start Engaging Parents of Students with Special Needs project at SPAN Parent Advocacy, along with Tatiana DaGrossa, who is behind the scenes this evening. Say hi, yay. And Stephanie, you can introduce yourself.
Yes, and I'm Stephanie Babbitt, and I am a parent group specialist on the START project for Central New Jersey County, so Union, Middlesex, and Monmouth counties. And we all wear a lot of hats at SPAN, so I also work on the New Jersey Inclusive Childcare Project as an early childhood inclusion coordinator. And Cynthia is joining us as well tonight. Cynthia is doing our Spanish interpretation. So, oh, hola. Hola.
Oh, and I also wanted to acknowledge Brenda Figueroa, who's also part of the START team. Brenda, I don't know if you wanted to say hi or...
Oh, I didn't even know Brenda was here. Hi, Brenda.
Everyone, I'm a parent group specialist. I cover Passaic and Hudson, and took my headpiece, so I'm sorry for it.
Well, welcome, Brenda. Thank you for being here. So I just wanted to review our workshop outcomes. So our goals for this evening are to review the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Supports Framework, to discuss how the pandemic has impacted family engagement, and to understand the different ways to engage families. And finally, we want to discuss families can use for the new school year moving forward. But first, before we get started, we want to just find out who's in the Zoom. So I'm going to launch a quick poll. And just wanted to know real quick, are you attending this event as a family member or caregiver, a classroom teacher or a paraprofessional, a school district administrator, or school or district administrator, I'm sorry, some other school staff, community stakeholder, or are you here in some other role? So if folks could just fill that out really quickly. Give you another couple of seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So most of you are here as parents, and there's some school staff here. So welcome, everyone. So next. An overview of NJTSS.
Yes, thank you so much, Debbie. And for those of you who do know our events that we hold like this, they're very casual. So feel free to post comments, ask questions in the chat box. If you have a question, that at a moment, you can always feel free to raise your hand. So feel free. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there because we are going to have a lot more questions coming up soon as well. So let's talk about an overview of New Jersey tiered systems of supports. As a quick refresher, this is a framework of supports and interventions to improve student achievement based on the core components of the multi-tiered systems of support and the 3-tier prevention logic of response to intervention. What does that mean? Well, NJTSS gives schools structure to meet the academic, the behavioral, the health, the enrichment, and the social emotional needs of all students. There are 3 tiers. Some districts may refer to it as RTI, which is response to intervention, or INRS, which is intervention and referral services. Later in this session, we will provide you with some strategies for finding out about this framework in your district, because I'm sure now you're wondering, does my district do this? Well, we'll give you some tools on the questions that you can ask. Our team has a collection of materials and webinars on our website regarding NJTSS, and I believe Tatiana will be dropping that link in there for you. But we will also be doing a follow-up email with all of our resources that we will be discussing tonight. So let's take a closer look. So as you can see from that triangle, we're going to go into and do a deeper dive now into the essential components of New Jersey tiered system of supports.
Thanks, Stephanie. So if you remember the triangle has foundational components. Those are the lines on the outside, and those are effective district and school leadership, family and community engagement, which we're focusing on here tonight, and positive school culture and climate. There are also instructional components, which include universal screening, collaborative problem solving, high quality learning environments, progress monitoring, staff professional development, and data-based decision making. So if you think about it, the difference between the foundational components and the instructional components, they work together in order to implement the the framework. So think about it as if you're baking a cake. Right? So if you're baking a cake, there are certain things you have to have in place before you can even get started. And those are what we consider our foundational components, right? So that would be effective district and school leadership, family and community engagement, positive school culture and climate. And then you have your ingredients, which we might look at as the instructional components, right? So, first and foremost is the universal screening, right? That's what we use to detect any of those warning signs or identify any challenges that our students might be having early on, right? And then we follow up with progress monitoring, database decision making, and we also throughout need staff professional development continuously and collaborative problem solving and high quality learning environments. So think of it, and if we put all of these together, our foundational components and our instructional components, then we have a well-baked framework. And Stephanie, you can talk about the family engagement piece of that.
Yes, thank you very much. So the foundational component for family and community engagement, it is the ongoing participation of family and community partners in the design, implementation, and sustainability of the New Jersey tiered system of supports framework, which includes the 4 pieces. So family community engagement includes involvement of families and community partners in the development and implementation of the school vision and mission, including the framework. 2, the identification of strategies and resources to accommodate cultural and linguistic differences and to link families, staff, and students to appropriate service providers and community partners. 3rd, it's the use of multiple means of culturally responsive, ongoing communication, including review of district and school level performance and progress data. And last, scheduling of intervention planning meetings to facilitate meaningful parent participation and review of student progress data. So I know that was a lot of information. So let's break it down even more. Debbie, next slide. So again, in thinking about this, we talked about NJTSS and we identified that it is a framework, but that there's 3 tiers. So when we look at 3 tiers, they start from your first tier, which is your universal, and then it goes up the tiers to a tier 2, to a tier 3, and it gets more, the level of supports are more intense. There's a greater frequency, a duration, more specified, more individualized to a particular student or to a family. So let's look at what this looks like around family engagement. A tiered approach to family engagement helps teachers and it helps administrators to adapt the needs, the contexts, and the preferences of every family in the school. Supports for families should match the tiered supports and services established for students. So you have those 3 tiers. The tiered supports are planned and prepared so that schools and their community partners can respond to anticipated needs of families and their children. And this is really setting the stage for the rest of our conversation tonight when we really start to talk about what family engagement looks like, how family engagement has been impacted, and how we can prepare for family engagement going forward. So Tier 1 is your universal support. It's school-wide support system for all families. Tier 1 establishes a school culture. It communicates expectations for behaviors, for learning. Family engagement efforts in Tier 1, they are proactive, equipping and informing families to prevent challenges for students. It's intentional and structured strategies for communication and engagement. So example of Tier 1 could be that the school offers a streamlined communication on a single platform that families regularly use. So let's think about an example of a universal Tier 1. It could be the district providing information on the district website. It could be the district providing information to families about the district return to school plan via email. Or robocalls about information, going onto the district app. These are different ways that's kind of universal when we think about ways to engage families. Another one is a family resource room. And speaking with Debbie, she had mentioned, yes, some school districts do have a family resource room where parents can physically go into the building and access the many resources there. So whether it's community resources or school resources that are there within the school district. But another way is through the pandemic and pivoting and going to remote, many of these school districts have created these resources on their district website. So almost like a resource room, a family resource room on a district website. And if we have time later, we'll show you one as an example, but you can see, kind of get an idea of what that Tier 1 universal family engagement piece looks like. Tier 2 is targeted intervention. And these are programs and strategies for groups of families who would benefit from that additional support. Families receive targeted supports based on their need or their child's needs that are more tailored than Tier 1 and maybe more frequent. So Tier 2 supports are often a rapid response to a need. And again, it could be a school type of support, it could be a community type of support. And this is where you'll start to hear that phrase wraparound supports. Wraparound supports are those types of things that could be going on within the community that could help provide some means of, again, engaging families if they have a particular need for something. But in a school district, per se, an example could be that some families need support maybe with Wi-Fi connectivity when the school transitioned to remote or to hybrid learning over the past year and a half. So the school district maybe offered a Wi-Fi hotspot or a learning pod for a group of families, or other supports to provide dependable internet access. So that could be an example of more of that targeted Tier 2. Another could be parent training. Parent training is a Tier 2 support for your child, for their for interventions for your child, or emails or text messages between teacher and parent, parent-teacher conferences. Things like that are an example of that Tier 2. And then we have Tier 3. Tier 3 is that more a smaller percentage of the population that's impacted by this. And that is tailored intervention strategies. And here would be an example of that. A family of a child with a developmental disability needs intensive support in order to access lessons and materials. So they need that adult to help them. The school sets up an individual check-in between the intervention specialist and the family, and provides maybe visual tip sheets for how to access online learning platforms. So that could be an example. So now we want to take a moment and hear from you. Can you think of anything that maybe your district did over the past year and a half that could be around
Engaging families. So
yes.
yeah, so we're
Yes.
gonna, so again, we're gonna launch a quick poll.
Thank you.
And Face Engage, launch. So just want to know, what are some of the ways that your district used over the last school year, 2020, 2021 school year, to engage families during the pandemic? And you can click on all that apply. Did they use texting, newsletters, surveys, social media, emails, phone communication, apps like a reminder, talking points, or something else?
And if there was something else and you'd like to share, feel free to unmute yourself or jot it down in the chat box.
Absolutely. People are still answering.
So email I'm seeing is kind of the
Big thing, yes.
The leader here. Email, and it looks like texting, social media.
Right. So everybody's using email. Let me see, share. Okay. So yeah, it looked like everybody used email, and social media was up there. Texting was pretty much even, and phone communication. Not too many newsletters, interestingly enough. And I thought I would see way more surveys, because I know we heard a lot about surveys. So
right.
But thank you everyone for your response.
And Andrea said in the chat box, it was mainly communication than engagement. Yes, exactly. This is
like that kind of one way, sharing information out. Gotcha.
And so what we talk about, and we'll talk about later, are some strategies around, making sure you're getting that two-way communication. So stay tuned.
Right. So this is, I'm sorry, Stephanie.
No, that's okay. So, and this is another opportunity. We want to have some more conversations about this. And it's a nice segue, that comment going into this, thinking about an opportunity to kind of share your thoughts. We as a team, when we were brainstorming and working on this, what we kept coming back to with some of these questions. We were thinking about, did you see a change in the way that your district engaged families during the pandemic? And, all of us have children in the school system. So we too have seen that change, but we want to hear from you. So did you see a change in the way that your district engaged families during the pandemic? Do you feel that your district was engaging all families? And if not, what were some of those barriers? And then what are some things that worked well that you would like to see continued?
So yeah, if you'd like to speak to any or all of those, you can unmute yourself. I think we're a small enough group that you can unmute yourself, or feel free to enter, your comment in the chat.
Mm-hmm. So did you see it? I'll ask it again. Did you see a change in the way that your district engaged families during the pandemic? Yeah, think about before, before the pandemic versus what was going on during. We were all had front row seats to our children's learning, and saw a lot, saw so many things. So how was your district engaging you? And did you feel that your district was engaging all families? Did you feel that all families had a voice? Were all families represented?
Carolina, you had your hand up?
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't see. I can't see, so I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's not funny, don't worry. With my district last year, my daughter was in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. I didn't see anything from the district. It was more personal with the teacher in the service, like the speech therapy. It was one-to-one. That was all for me. That was like only the three of us working together with my daughter. That it was great, because that was the teacher. She was amazing. The support that I have from her was beyond. But from the district, nothing.
That's interesting.
Was it one of those where if you wanted information, you would kind of have to go to the district website to find it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was the more the personal phone from the teacher, like texting her cell phone more than anything from the.
That's
So it
interesting.
sounds like there was probably more effective tier 2 that we were just talking about before, more of a tier 2 intensive communication with you versus that universal, support for everyone. So that's really interesting to hear
Also,
that.
what I'm also hearing is that, and I've heard that a lot too, that parents and teachers have been able to build more substantial relationships, right? So they've been able to work together more effectively and more on a different level, right? Because they're, like you said, there was that one-on-one communication. And I see Jamel put in that virtual meetings with parents have been more successful compared to face-to-face. And that was a big deal, right? So a lot of IEP meetings, parent-teacher meetings are being held virtually, and they're more convenient, right, for parents.
And accessible for some.
Exactly. In a lot of cases, right? For parents who are, tech savvy and have that technology, it certainly was a more convenient. I know I just recently had a meeting with my son's guidance counselor, and it was just so easy not to have to run all the way to the school.
Right.
I wanted to add, Debbie, that I see Veronica shared that yes, everything was virtual, or she commented, and each need was met in a different way. And it was mostly one-on-one and via text message. She was able to communicate.
Did anyone identify anything that may have been a barrier, or saw what could have been, a barrier? I noticed during my own experience in my district, I was very aware that things were not everything was translated, for our Spanish speaking families in our district. And I thought that could be a barrier for some families getting access to, to some very important information. Was there anything else that anyone, Veronica said, oh, yep, PT and OT meeting for my daughter, Zoom meeting once a week. Yeah, Zoom really transformed and really changed the way that, we engaged with our district and way districts engaged with families. But was there anything else or something good that came out? I would say maybe Zoom even was something good possibly that came out of it because of the accessibility. Did anyone else? I can't see if anyone has hands up or not. I'm sorry. Did anyone wanted to add to that conversation? No.
And we'll be coming back to this. This will be kind of like a theme throughout our presentation. So if anything occurs to you, please feel free to enter it in the chat or use the hand raising function. Okay, so moving on. So, this has been quite a year, right? So we've talked about it a lot. There have been webinars and meetings and all kinds of things, but it's an important conversation. It's not like it's something that you really get bored of, especially with so much uncertainty right now, 2 weeks or so before school starts. I keep hearing the phrase learning loss, right? That we're concerned with learning loss. And, and it makes me cringe because the reality is, if there's one thing that we did all of last year was learn. I can't think of, we learned a lot. I don't think we lost anything. I cringe because many of our children have learned a lot of things, right? They've learned how to use technology that they never had. They learned how to use maybe curriculums that they never would have. They learned how to use, how to work independently, a lot of them more independently than they would have had the opportunity to otherwise. So we have learned a lot. And parents also, adults have learned a lot, not just parents. Both parents and teachers have been able to peek behind the curtain a little bit, right? And see into each other's worlds, and a lot of times literally, right? Because you're on Zoom and you can actually see into each other's homes. Parents, I think, understand a little more about what and how their children are learning. Some parents, especially parents of elementary school students, understand a little more about just how patient teachers have to be, or just how patient it takes to be a teacher, how much patience it takes. Teachers, I think, understand a little bit better some of the challenges that parents face, and even just getting their kids out the door and to classrooms, or in this case, in front of a computer. I think that everyone has gained a better understanding of the importance and the benefit of building strong family school partnerships. So for a lot of folks, there's this newfound understanding of just how important schools are in a community. So for a lot of children and families during the pandemic, it was schools that provided what in a lot of cases may have been their own meal during the day. So schools served a very important function in our communities. Schools have been partnering with families and community organizations to support student learning in ways that we never have before because we never had to before. We have an opportunity now, I think, to leverage these newfound partnerships and to continue to support student learning. How? How can we do that? Here are a couple of best practices that have come out of the pandemic. So we've understand now the importance of being more inclusive, of having more inclusive outreach. I think that Stephanie, we talked about that a little bit. We alluded to that a little bit when you were talking about making sure that all materials and information are in the languages that are spoken by the people in your district, the parents in your district, whether that's Spanish or Korean or Creole. We have to make sure that those materials are available. And making sure that that communication is two-way, that you're not just the information going out, but you're finding out what parents are, experiencing, what their concerns are, what their input is. So yeah, so we want to engage parents also. Another thing is engaging parents as learning coaches, right? So in order to do that, are we providing parents with the materials that they need to support their children at home? Are they able to, for example, parent universities, where they can get the teaching toolkits and get access to understanding the curriculum that's being used, and so they can understand what expectations are being placed on their children by their teachers, access to academic content. And I think most important, after everything that we've been through, is that I think both parents and school districts and teachers understand the importance of the need for grace and compassion, right? So many families have been negatively impacted by the COVID pandemic. Educators have found that in order to effectively connect with families, they have to remember to have grace for students and families who are trying their best, but are likely overwhelmed. Leading with compassion, even in moments of frustration, benefit the long-term relationships with families. And even more, a school-wide, district-wide initiative, some administrators and schools have found ways to channel shared resources to help families. And that goes back to what Stephanie was talking about with wraparound services, to help families who could use a little extra support. These type of outreach and overall support go a long way in communicating that students and families are valued and an essential part of the connected school community. So, speaking about parents, Stephanie's going to talk about some different ways now that we can engage families.
Thank you for that, Debbie. And it was, the pandemic really, put a spotlight on the fact that it really did emphasize. I think, we've done other workshops and webinars and conversations around NJTSS, but I think the pandemic, when we look at really about that community and family engagement, it was so magnified, in the past, what we've been going through over the past 18 months, and really starting to think about this upcoming school year. And so, before we touched on thinking about some of those best practices, some of the things, I don't want you to lose sight of stuff that you may have picked up or learned or that you really liked or benefited from, or your child benefited from in the, when we were in remote or, over the past year. Make sure you're sharing that information as you go forward. So it's a nice segue into this next conversation around what are some ways and the different ways to engage families. So when we think about the role of in family and community engagement. What does that look like? And they could serve many purposes. And I'd love to hear from you as I go through these and to reflect for yourself on maybe how you saw your role evolve over the year and a half, what, you know, and something that you would like to continue to do. So the first is as an advocate. You know, when we think about engaging families as an advocate, you yourself thinking of the family as an advocate, it's requesting services and alerting the school to your child or your family's needs. Again, we talked a little bit about this before. I think I read that, you know, for the upcoming school year, you know, during the pandemic, lunch, the free and the free and reduced lunch services, like that's something that was going to be continued, and it's for everyone, you know, as we go into the new school year. I know I think that's universal. I know in my district we're doing that. It is, right? That's so that's something I think, again, that kind of came out of the pandemic, that understanding that that's something that families could really you know, utilize and need. So so again, requesting the services and alerting the school to you or your family's needs as an advocate. The next is as a partner, you know, thinking about being that partner, providing the parent perspective alongside the school staff or on a leadership or an IEP team or through a committee. You know, your input is invaluable. You know, you bring so much to the table. And so as a partner, it's where, you know, bringing that information and sharing that information. Another way the families were engaged as a support recipient. So accepting and utilizing supports that have been provided by the school. You know, schools over the past year were doing things like, you know, Wellness Wednesdays, where Mindfulness Wednesday or Mindfulness Mondays and Wellness Wednesdays, where districts were providing some maybe guidance counselors or guidance supports to families during that time who needed it. Things like that, support recipient, support provider. Providing interventions to your child in the home and supporting other families and other parents, formally or informally. I think what we also saw, again, in engaging families, many over the course of the past year and a half in the work that we've done on our team, heard from so many parents who said that they kind of were leaning on each other, leaning on other parents for a level of support. I think maybe some support groups even came out of the conversations. But these are that, again, really having that, getting that support that's needed. And then lastly, as a collaborator. So offering a perspective that school personnel do not have by providing feedback on the fit or satisfaction or your own home experience, recommendations for improvement, accessibility. It's really about seeing the family as a collaborator throughout this process of family engagement. So after looking at this, how do you think you have been engaged over the last 18 months? Or is there a role that you took on now more than ever in this? I mean, I would certainly think as you know, as we call ourselves a learning coach, you know, I think we were doing a nice amount of advocating for our children and partnering and really being collaborative. But I wanted to open it up. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Yes, Veronica, I am an advocate. When we were working on this, I said, I have a feeling that we're going to hear a lot of parents refer to themselves as advocates and partners for sure. Advocate, Carolina. Yep, absolutely. Because many of us we're our children's voices, and, you know, for some of our children. So it's really being able to express that with our district. Anyone else?
Absolutely. And not just for young children. I know my son, you know, is in high school, and I knew at the beginning he's not a kid that's gonna speak up and, you know, say I need help with this, and, you know, sitting at home on a Zoom, you know, it's easy for him to fall behind. So I had to tell the teachers, you know, you need to really make a point to ask him if he understands, because he's not going to tell you if he doesn't.
Mm-hmm. And Tatiana said that she saw herself as a collaborator. And absolutely, I don't know if Tatiana, you wanted to elaborate on being a collaborator.
Sure, I would love to. So during the first time the school opened abruptly back in March of 2020, and for the first time, I think I have experienced my son's learning or education at home via Zoom, and I was able to see how he navigates the the communication part, following directions, switching classes. And he was, at the time, he was a sophomore in high school. And it really opened up my eyes on some additional supports and struggles that, struggles mostly that he was having. And after about a week trying to really help him settled in the new routine, I realized that it would take more than just me supporting him in the home. And I alerted the case manager and his other related services providers. And I've shared as a collaborator what I'm seeing happening at home. And we weren't sure if it's a result of stress due to the pandemic or some things that, he was demonstrating that the skill deficits that I didn't realize he had at the time. So I had to really talk to my team, the IEP team, and I was supports provider at home, but also I received support for myself, some parent training around delivering instruction or assisting him, and other related services sessions that were initially offered only as worksheets. But as weeks progressed, we realized that we won't be going back to school, in a month or so. And those worksheets, again, I had to advocate and collaborate with the team to turn into a virtual one-on-one session. So
do you think that is something you'll take forward? Do you think that those things that you learned and the way that you had, because there's through the experience, there's a different way of collaborating. Do you think that is something you will take forward with you going into this new, different school year? It's different from last year, but still different.
Right. Thank you for this follow-up question, because, we all learned from this experience. And last year, the school year that was sort of on and off in-person instruction, we worked together because one of his related services providers was not able to return to school in person, even though his school was opened for in-person instruction. And we again collaborated to combine or to utilize the social skills instruction with the same provider, but virtually, and supplemented it with other opportunities through guidance counseling department or a school psychologist that stepped up. And another thing that I think I learned from this whole situation is that as parents, even though we know our children, we are providers, we are supporters, but I think we also need to ask for help when we need it. And I felt as though with the social emotional aspect or learning aspect, I was not able to myself to support him, and I needed help as a parent. I was very under a lot of pressure and stress, and I accessed the social emotional learning for parents through the school district that was offered. I was not aware that they were offering this training to parents, and through being a part of a special education parent advisory group, we brought it up to the school district, and we advocated and collaborated for this curriculum, evidence-based curriculum, to be available to parents and families for adults. So that was like a really, really great partnership and that we had with the school district. So yes, we learned so much out of this really terrible pandemic that happened.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Tatiana. And I wanted to jump over into the comments because I see Lilia, and I hope I said that correctly. Lilia is a provider of support. Lilia is the family coordinator in our school district, so created a wellness team who periodically called families to check on them and their needs, which is great. That's one of those more intensive supports, which is great. And also helped with needs like food and school supplies, hotspots, medicine. I'm not sure if you're able to unmute yourself or not, but I would really like to hear a little more about, I guess what I'd like to know is, were you getting to be able to be the provider of support? Was that based on surveying families, or were families reaching out for that support? How was your district, or in your role, able to know what families needed?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm walking my dog, so that's what I did.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm so curious because I'd love to know.
Yes. Well, we created this, our principal created this wellness team. And basically it was more like, calling families. We have 400 students. So we call the 400 families that we have in school,
Wow.
each and one of them. So just, like a simple conversation. How are you? How are you doing? And then families are very open. We're a small school, so families really open up to us. So they, as a simple conversation, they start telling us their needs. And sometimes they tell us their friends' needs, So it was like a chain of, and then, the nurse make phone calls, the 2 social workers, myself. So we were a team of 7 people calling the 400 families. So if we, through this simple conversation, if we thought that families needed more specific help, then we direct them to the social worker.
So I have a question.
That's fantastic.
That is fantastic. I have a question. So is this something that came about directly as a result of the pandemic? And the second part of that is it something that you're going to continue after, as we go
Good
back?
questions.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. This wellness team was created as a result of the pandemic because we started seeing students missing school. So we thought, we were wondering what they were missing.
Right.
Classes. So we started calling families to find out why they were missing classes. So the reasons vary a lot. So it could be due to they were infected or lost of job or anything. So we started that as a result of the pandemic. And yes, we plan to continue doing it.
That's amazing. That's great. So,
and I love it because I could see that evolving. I could see that you could bring in some other partners into that and see how it's almost fluid. It'll really, the needs of that team will be dictated by the environment and how children are coming back to school, where their head is at from the summer.
And we are located, our school is located in New Brunswick. So we always look for partnerships through Robert Wood Johnson hospitals and Rutgers University. So besides those phone calls, we were able to provide, to open up our food pantry to all students in need. So we provide a lot of food besides school lunches. So it was like food from the food pantry and clothing too.
That's great.
I just love that so much, because I think it was also seeing that, it could be easy to just say, attendance, kids are slipping through the cracks, but it was a real intentional effort to say, we need to reach out to them. We need to find out what's going on and we need to know how we can support them.
Exactly. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Kimiko, I saw that you had your hand up. Did you want to share?
Hi. No, I was clapping my hands. That's a fantastic story. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was really great. And Andrea said it's so great to hear. It's definitely needed. It's the first time I hear this. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I think it's something we all may take back to our own districts and say, listen, we had. Yeah, that's a best practice. I think that's, when we talk about those best practices, that's definitely one of them. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that.
Okay. So as we return to school, it's going to be, this is focusing on, we're going to switch a little bit and start focusing a little bit, at least in this part of our presentation, on the academics. So as we start going back to school, it's going to be important to assess. And I think somebody had put in the chat when I talked about cringe. I think somebody made a comment about another comment that or another phrase that has been unfinished teaching. Yeah, that's what it was. Unfinished teaching and learning is another phrase. And so, teachers during the pandemic, first of all, in order to be successful, our learners have to master certain skills, right? And our teachers worked hard during the pandemic to provide instruction, but students were often unable to master skills due to challenges with technology and access, attendance, and other factors, kind of like what Lilia was referring to, that were really beyond anybody's control. So, some of our instruction was unfinished or uneven. And so as we return to school, it's going to be really important to assess which skills might need extra attention. And so, as previously discussed, NJTSS and other tiered support frameworks focus on early screening. That's the best part. It's a very proactive framework. So it's early screening and progress monitoring in order to identify any skills or skill deficits early on before they can significantly affect or impact your child's progress. So it's important for parents to understand how the school will be performing these tasks and how families can be supportive. On the next slide, we're going to highlight just a few of the questions that parents can use to engage their classroom teachers and other school staff, so everybody's on the same page. So when, going back to school, and this is something that you can discuss with at a school board meeting, maybe with some, in your CPAG, other parent groups. So what will the school use? Or will the school use a systematic approach to assess deficit skill needs and provide extra help or support for students? Another question is, what do you call this approach? So this is what Stephanie was talking about early in the presentation. You want to know. So we're talking about NJTSS, New Jersey Tiered System of Support. You want to know, is your school using NJTSS? Are they using another multi-tiered systems framework like RTI? Is your school using PBSIS, which is Positive Behavior Supports in Schools, which is a multi-tiered system that supports behaviors, that affects behavior. So response to intervention, tiered system of supports, which of these is your school using? You can ask them. What screening process will you be using to identify students who need additional supports? And are parents notified of their children's screening results? These are questions that you want to know the answers to. What processes do you use to determine which intervention to provide? So how do you know which tier your child is going to be on, or how do you determine the movement between tiers? So how do you know when your child is going to move up or down? You want to understand how that process is determined. What process do you use to determine which intervention to provide? And that's not only academic, we're also talking about behavioral. So are you using PBSIS or social emotional? Are you employing one of the curriculums that Tatiana discussed earlier, one of the social emotional curriculums? You want to know all of these questions. So we want to know, are you going to get information about how to support your child's learning at home? So parents have started to learned how to fall into that role as learning coach. And it's not something that we necessarily want to give up, right? We want to be able to continue to support our students at home. And finally, if your child is already receiving special education services, how can NJTSS help? Excuse me. So these are just a few of the questions that we highlighted. There's a resource that we will be providing to you that has a longer, more comprehensive list relating to how you can engage your school district around NJTSS or the return to school. And Stephanie's going to talk about some other ways that you can engage the school.
Yes. Thank you. More opportunities. Thank you for that, Debbie. We will be providing the questions in a handout when we send our follow-up email. So just so you know, everyone will get a copy of that, because it's a long list, but it's a lot of really good questions. And the first thing you can do is, we've been talking about, and we continue to promote, because this is really part of our project, is really about engaging with your special education parent advisory group and with any other parent groups in your district or in your community. It's really about engaging with them to talk about this. Bring some of those questions back to your parent group. I recently worked with a parent group in a district, and they wanted more information about this. And so we talked about, how they can advocate for having this as a parent training session. So request parent training. You can by all means request parent training on NJTSS so that parents can also better understand this. We do, often we do hear from parents who say, I think my child might be in it. They might be in a tier. I'm not sure what tier 2 is. I don't know. How do I get information about it? How do I know that the progress is being monitored? So this is really that questionnaire, that checklist is a really great great tool, and really in also engaging with parent groups. Getting involved with your Board of Education. I know Board of Education meetings are a little spicy at the moment, but it's important to continue to get involved with your Board of Ed meetings. Review minutes. Look at the minutes from your Board of Ed. All of this information is on your school district's website. Getting involved, reviewing minutes, understanding how to participate in a Board of Ed meeting. There's every meeting, there's a public comment section. So that's where you can really talk about, programming. The goal for Board of Ed members is really focus on policy and goals for the upcoming school year. So this is a great time and a great opportunity to talk about this and say, hey, universal screening, how are we addressing this? This should also be in your school district's plan, which should be on your school district website. What is your school district doing to address learning that has been impacted by the pandemic? Most of them should be talking about universal screening. So find out, what does that look like? When is that happening? What's going to happen with the results? How, what will that look like in our district? And continue to review your school's plan and look at the ESSER funding. Encourage the use of funds for family engagement. There is a lot of information from the American Rescue Plan, from the ESSER plan. All of it does have a lot of information in there about family engagement. Family engagement continues to be a really important piece in working collaboratively between families and school districts. So it is important that you get that information. And as far as the board stuff, we will be providing links in our follow-up resources on how to, if you want to run for a school board, how to run for a school board, and then also some of the frequently asked questions about the Board of Education.
Great.
And then just to kind of wrap up now, one of the things, our next slide, one of the things that we always do on our team, so we present our topics, we have some conversation, we give you some strategies. Now you have homework. So now it's about your plan, your action plan going forward. We've provided you with such, with a wealth of information this evening. You have been wonderful in also being contributing partner to this conversation as well. So now what are you going to do? What are your next steps? And this is a 4-step framework called the GROW model. And so it really starts with your goal. So discussing your goals for your child this year, understanding the expectations of the teacher, and that the teacher understands your expectations. That's part of that two-way communication that we often talk about. So with that, we will be providing in our resources in the follow-up email some great tools you can use. We have a back to school update, a quick 1-pager that you can complete that talks about, how your child learns. We have a positive student profile that we talk about in all of our conversations that you can fill out. And again, share that information. What are your goals? What are your child's goals for the school year? Next is the R for reality. Listen to the teacher. This has been it's been rough, everyone. I mean, this has not been easy on any of us. And, I think we all left in June with a spring in our step, thinking September was going to be, very different than what it's shaping up to be. So let's look at this reality, and let's be realistic, and let's be kind and empathetic, and really understanding we're all in this together. And we are trying to just really get through a very tough time right now. So listen to the teacher, try to understand what's happening, and what supports are available. Next are your options. Brainstorm options. Discuss what worked well during the pandemic. What were the challenges? Be open. The more information you can provide, the better advocate you are for your child, the better and the stronger a collaborative relationship you can form with your child's team. And then way forward. Identify the next steps. What supports might be needed. Come up with an action plan, and what will you do and what will the school do? So these are things to think about. Tatiana is just dropping link after link, so much great information in there. And we are going to, like I said, all of these links are going to be in an email, but we wanted to just make sure that you take from here some pieces of information that you'll be able to use as you go into this next school year. And that's about it, right, Debbie?
That's it. We'd like to thank all of you for your time and your commitment to helping and supporting your children and all children. We always try to bring you information and resources for families and professionals who are concerned about the achievement of students. So we would really like it if you would take a minute and give us some feedback. by clicking on the link and filling out the brief evaluation. I think Tatiana dropped that link into the chat box. We really appreciate it. We really use your feedback. It really informs, the work that we do, lets us know what we're doing well, what things we might want to change, what information that you need. So if there's something that you need, some information that you need, trainings on that you would like to see, please let us know.
This is going to be this is part 1, right, Debbie, of our 3-part series.
So we'll be talking about inclusion in November. I think it's November, might be October. And then again in the spring, we'll be coming back with another NJTSS webinar. So if there's something else that you want to know about the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Supports, please let us know. And maybe that can be the focus of our next NJTSS webinar. We'd like to know, because we want to bring you information that is useful to you. So please let us know what you need to know. Bye-bye.
Okay.